So welcome to the Burn Engineering Workshop. First things first, so in the last video I mentioned the possibility of doing a workshop tour, and that was a pretty popular suggestion, so here we are, the Burn Engineering Workshop. My workshop is under my house. It's basically 3 separate rooms under the house. I've split those rooms up to like a storage room, the car sort of assembly room, which we're in at the moment, and then the sort of fabrication / machine shop room. We'll start in the storage room because that's probably the most boring and definitely the most messy. So this is sort of the parts room. I've got some timber shelves running on each side. A little bit of camping and sporting goods has crept in. And there's the obligatory beer fridge. Here's the sort of timber shelves I've got. This shelf is designated Stratos parts, so I'm forever removing parts and adding parts, hence the sort of not super organised nature of it all. Up the top there, see a whole lot of spares for the other rally car, a few 105 gearboxes and heads and a block and a sump and a few bits and pieces. On that wall, a few parts bins and then a rack holding a couple of spare 105 diffs for the rally car. Got the engine crane, and that's the freshly rebuilt motor for the Bluey road car restoration that's taken a bit of a hit since the Stratos moved in. And this is the main vehicle assembly area. It's not a massive room, but it's big enough for a Stratos and a 105. We'll go and have a closer look at a few things. Got a bit of a feature wall on one side, a few glory photos of the car, a few offerings to the gods of speed, a couple of trophies, and my little display of 90s world. Always loved my gadgets, and growing up in the 90s, just a few of the electronic goodies I had back in the day. A little HP 200LX palm top that ran DOS. Got the Sega Master System and the Game Gear. I was convinced that mini discs were going to be the next big thing after CDs, and invested heavily in mini discs. Yeah, that was a mistake. The classic Kenwood Walkman, listened to during many a maths lesson at high school, and a few Casio watches. So this is the main workbench / desk. It's a steel frame thing that I've dynabolted to the floor and the wall, so it's super sturdy. Built in a little shelf system for all these parts trays, and so I've got all my fasteners and grommets, O-rings, split pins, all that sort of gear, all organised and easy to get to. A couple of speakers inbuilt into the kick panel down there, and behind all that there's a computer and an amp so that I can run Project Binky on a loop to keep the motivation up. The wall, got some cabinets for WD-40 and batteries for the camera, and LED no lead lights, grease and all that sort of gear. Inbuilt into the bench is this roller cabinet. This is for all my electrical stuff. Still need to do a proper organisation of it all, but it's pretty functional at the moment. That little kick panel is just held on by magnets, so you can still wheel the tool trolley out if you need to. So this is the main toolbox. I love this toolbox. I've had it since I was 18, and I've slowly been purchasing all the tools to make it what I think is a complete set. It's all metric because I don't understand imperial, and it's KC branded tools mostly. Yeah, KC's I think is pretty reasonable quality, sort of middle of the road, but it seems to do the job. So we'll run through a few of the drawers. So this is a socket set. It's got 1/4, 3/8 half-inch sockets and drives, and it's got normal sockets and deep sockets on all 3 sets. But to be honest, 90% of the time I just use 1/4 inch. I love 1/4 inch ratchets, and I've got quite a few of them. I love these little ones. These are just so nice to use. I love them so much that I bought a packet of them, and I've got a few along here that have dedicated sockets that I use all the time. So I've got a deep 13 and a normal 13, and then I've got a normal 10mm and a deep 10mm. Because I mean, seriously, who's got time to be swapping sockets over on ratchets? I've got screwdrivers, sort of blades, inspection stuff, mirrors, pin punches, special sockets, a few lazy man tools. Who doesn't love a ratchet spanner? Allen keys, T-bar Allen keys, pliers. Hey Dylan, can you get us a 19mm offset ring spanner? Thank you. And what about a 17mm combination spanner? Good. Thank you. And a 16mm open-ended spanner, please. And so what do we do with all our tools once we've finished using them?
We put them away.
The bottom cabinet's still a bit of work in progress. Screwdrivers and pry bars, impact sockets, which I really do not have enough of and need to get more. There's sort of service tools, torque wrench, timing light, oil filter stuff. Crow's feet, special spanners, long hex inserts. It's hammer. And then sort of custom engine building tools and custom gearbox stuff. Most of that's for the 105. But I'm sure some Stratos stuff will creep in there soon. Over this side, we've got the dirty area. So the basin there, and this is a stainless steel, I think it was a developer tray or something from for photographic equipment. Anyway, stainless steel, cut it all down, welded this lip on it, and this is great for pulling apart like gearboxes and diffs and stuff like that. Really easy to clean and keeps the mess contained underneath there. I've got a big bin full of towels and rags, and up top a lot of drip trays and spill trays, and then just a cabinet with some horrendous chemicals in it, and a ultrasonic cleaner that does absolutely nothing. Up on the wall there also retractable power cable, a couple of jack stands, and the airline. Pretty basic stuff. But I think this is what you're all here for. This is the machine shop / fabrication area. So let's get into it. So we'll start in the centre with the welding bench. Lucky enough to have big enough room to have an island workbench, which is awesome, particularly when you're working on big stuff. It means you can get around to all different sides of it. I bought this bench from some guy. It was in pretty bad nick. It had a 1mm steel sheet top on it. Ripped that off, got this 6mm steel plate guillotine to the right size. 6mm is probably the minimum you want for a welding bench, but that was the maximum size they could guillotine. It does the job. Spent a fair bit of time getting it flat. It's not super level, it's pretty good, but it's very, very flat. As much as I hate grinding, well, I don't hate it, I just hate the noise and the mess it makes. It's pretty much an essential part of fabrication. So under here I've got 4 grinders ready to go with different discs. I guess this is my horizontal non-movable grinding scarecrow. Wire wheel, cut-off disc, flapper disc, If you haven't tried these red ceramic flapper discs, give them a go. They're twice the price, but they last about 4 times as long and they remove an insane amount of metal. Absolute convert on them. Get in your hole. And the grinding disc could hardly ever use that now. So on this side of the bench, I've sort of inbuilt a couple of old toolboxes and tool chests that my brother had lying around. They're not the greatest quality, but they give me a whole heap more drawers, and drawers are by far the best method of storage I've discovered, and also a couple of cupboards to store things in. Up here I've got my aluminium plate for doing certain welding jobs on, and a bit of MDF and some blades for the CAD. Top drawer, we've got a whole bunch of steel rules, some squares, some verniers / scribers, dividers, centre punches, texters, pens and scribes. That is a bit of carbide lathe tool that has been brazed into a bit of stainless steel. That scribe will outlast me and a nuclear holocaust. This is my favourite scribe. It's a bit of bronze or something that I've put a sewing needle into the end of and glued it in with epoxy. Ripped that off click spring. That is the most accurate scribe I've ever used. It is awesome. And when you damage the tip, you just heat up the epoxy, rip it out and put a new one in. CAD, so it's just, you know, masking tape and scissors. Stuff for cleaning welds, so try to keep, this is mostly for aluminium, so try to keep this away from anything but aluminium, so all those wire brushes are very, very clean. Down here we've just got grinding discs, rivet guns and Dremel tools. You can never have too many hammers or clamps. And this is the TIG Welder. Lives underneath the overhang of the bench, and it's on a little welding trolley with casters, so I can easily move it over to the car. Yeah, it's your standard 200 amp AC/DC Chinese welder. It's been awesome. I haven't had any issues with it. The only thing I don't like about it is that the frequency of the pulse is way too quick. It only goes down to 0.5 hertz, and that's too fast to do any sort of aluminium welding with. But for the price, can't really argue. And because I got it on eBay, even better. Massive vise. It's a beer for scale. Opposite the workbench on this side, we've got another workbench with a few bits and pieces. Made a little aluminium rack to hold all the cordless tools. Under the bench, got my selection of bar stock. You don't want to be caught out with the incorrect sized bar. And under that is a whole bunch of storage bins for basically sort of scrap metal, but hopefully keep it fairly organised. So some mould steel sheet, aluminium sheet, RHS sections, and a whole bunch of stainless and bends and stuff like that. And in the little silver bins, it's just even smaller scrap. So a whole bunch of shim stock and various bits of aluminium and steel. Scrap is useful, but only if you can find it. In the middle of this bench, I've got my surface plate. Bought this totally on a whim from eBay. Didn't think I'd ever use it, just wanted to say I had a surface plate. But since I got the height gauge as well, this little surface plate has become indispensable. I do all my marking up on here now. It's so nice to have a known flat surface. Yeah, really glad I bought that. Made this rack out of some PVC pipe to store all my TIG filler rods. It keeps everything relatively airtight and helps keep the corrosion down to a minimum, and obviously helps me keep track of what I've got. And like I said, you can never have too many clamps or vice grips. So in this cabinet next to the surface plate, I've got all my measurement gear, digital protractor, super handy. You probably see me use this all the time. Another digital protractor, gauge blocks, rage-inducing telescopic gauges. Unfortunately, they are required. and then a whole bunch of micrometers. Don't have nearly enough micrometers. I'm still missing a heap of ranges, but measurement gear is really expensive. Well, good quality measurement gear is really expensive, and there is absolutely no point buying poor quality measurement gear. Trust me. On the end of the bench, I've got this pretty decent quality set of shears. It's got a good capacity for steel and aluminium. Makes a super clean cut. The only problem with the shear is that it always deforms the side of material that you're cutting off. Sometimes that's not an issue, you don't need it, but sometimes you want to save both pieces, so the shear isn't the tool for that, but still pretty useful. So tucked away in this corner on wheels, which is why it's so wobbly, is my very overused mini bandsaw. I made this fairly hefty table for when I'm using it as a vertical bandsaw. It does come with a table, but it was made out of cheesecloth. It was completely useless. Anyway, this one's quite sturdy. I only got this thing pretty recently, and I can't believe I waited so long before buying a bandsaw. If I was to set up a workshop again, the next tool after I bought a drill press would be a bandsaw. So tucked away in the corner here, we've got the sandblasting cabinet. Pretty decent size, can get some reasonably large things in it. I was pretty excited when I got this, but turns out you need a huge amount of air to run one of these things. I've got a pretty big compressor. Granted, you know, half the tank's probably full of water, but it really struggles to keep up with this thing. In fact, when I was using the Venturi style gun that picks the sand up from the hopper down the bottom, it was completely useless, and I was almost about to get rid of it. I then swapped it for a gravity feed gun with a little bin on the top for the media, and it's quite usable now. The only downside of that is you've got to stop every now and again and fill up the little bin on the gun, but that gives your compressor time to catch up with the amount of air the thing uses. And here is the sheet metal bender. Pretty good unit now after some pretty heavy modification. It was almost useless out of the box, but it's pretty good now. It's got the removable fingers, so you can do some intricate bending, and you can also go past 90 degrees pretty easily, which is also very handy. I started off with one of those 3-in-1 roller bending shear devices, and whilst the shear and the rollers were totally useless, the bender itself was pretty good. I was pretty happy with it, but this thing is definitely better. Well, it's got bigger capacity anyway. So we'll move on to my little mill. I guess, you know, you call it a benchtop mill. I think it's about 50 or 60 years old though, so it's very chunky and heavy, which is good, so it's quite rigid. It's got a very small table and not much travel. Always running into travel issues with it. One good thing about it though is that it's got quite a tall head on it, so that you know, you can lift the head really high, so you can get some tall stuff in, or use really long drills. To be honest, I had it for ages and hardly used it much because it had so much backlash that it was impossible to get any accurate reading off the manual scales. But once I bit the bullet and put on a poor man's DRO, so I've got a scale across here, one down here and one on the quill, it's become quite useful. I'd love a bigger mill, like something around the size of a Bridgeport or something like that, but I've actually got an old CNC mill sitting under my carport at the moment, so I probably shouldn't buy another mill. Over to the lathe. I love this lathe. It's been very good to me. Try to take good care of it. It's got quite a long bed on it. It's got a really good throw. In fact, you can actually remove that part of the bed if you need a bigger throw. It's got all gear head, so no changing of belts for speeds. It's a 3-phase motor, but there's a variable frequency drive on it to run it off single phase. So I've got some speed control. Metric lead screw. Added a quick change tool post because you've got to have a quick change tool post. Yeah, it's been awesome. The The bearings in the spindle must still be in really good nick because I get super accurate results with it. The only downside to it is that, and it's probably because I'm running it through a variable frequency drive, is that it's lacking a bit of horsepower. So I could take much bigger cuts. It's rigid enough to take bigger cuts than I do, but it just doesn't have the horsepower to keep up with it. But yeah, apart from that, it's awesome. So, I mean, if you don't have a lathe, get a lathe. In between the lathe and the mill, I've got another tool chest with a lot of the tooling required for both of the machines. Once you buy a lathe or a mill, you'll soon discover that it is the tooling that is in fact the expensive part, because you need an infinite amount of it, and I only have a small amount. This is the tooling for the mill, or the stuff I use on a regular basis. 1 2 3 blocks metric for setting things up. Some parallels, some ER hex and square blocks, bunch of ER collets, and all the carbide end mills that I use. So in this cabinet above the lathe, I've got all the lathe tools I use on a fairly regular basis. They're all the quick change tools sitting on a little rack. Still need to get more holders. I've got a heap of boring bars here that need to go into quick change holders. Got a proper lathe file, you know, a few brushes and stuff. The Zeus book, so I can work out what tapping drill I need, and then spot for a live center. And on the off chance that I haven't left the chuck key in the chuck, it hangs up there. But I mean, to be honest, most of the time it's just left in the chuck. So tucked away in this corner, just got various little blocks of wood for, you know, drilling into and making quick jigs up with. Always handy. Got a selection of offcuts and bar stock and things like that. Bits of RHS. And on this wall, behind all the machines, we've got all my sheet stock. And then we've got the drill press, linisher, and the bench grinder. So next to the bench grinder, we've got the press. You've seen this a fair bit because I use it all the time. Once again, I bought this ages ago, had it for a long time. It's been really good. It's quite a rigid design. I think I bought it for like 180 bucks. It was nothing. Originally sold as a sort of benchtop mounted press, but I made this little frame up to attach it to the wall, because really the only issue I had with it was that I couldn't put really long things like axles and stuff through it. So now with it sitting up on the wall like that, heaps of height to play with, and it's out of the way. Over to the bead roller. I've talked about this thing quite a bit before. Like I said, it was completely useless as I got it, so I welded these massive sections of RHS to the back of it, which made the thing super rigid. It's much better now. Then the problem was you needed 3 hands to work it, but once adding the steering wheel on the back instead of the stupid hand crank, it is now quite usable. It's still better with 2 people, and you know, when I get a bit of free time, maybe I'll put a 12-volt motor on it, but yeah, that's just at the bottom of the list at the moment. And that brings us to the most important bit of equipment in the workshop, the thinking couch. I did say thinking couch. So I hope you enjoyed that little tour of the Burn Engineering Workshop. I could talk about this stuff forever, but we'll see how the video goes down and take it from there. I did today go out and pick up some fairly exotic material for the next project, which I'll start tomorrow. But until then, thanks for watching. Cheers.